Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. There's something strangely comforting about the sound of pens scratching against paper. It's rhythmic, steady, the kind of background noise that helps you focus when the lecture slides blur together. I was half listening to the professor, my hand moving automatically as I jotted down notes about neural pathways. A soft breeze from the cracked window stirred the edge of my notebook, just enough to brush against my wrist. Then, the sharp vibration of my phone against the desk broke the silence. Heads turned. A few classmates glanced over their shoulders, curious, but no other phones lit up. Frowning, I flipped the screen upward. White text glared against a red banner. Emergency alert, get ready for evacuation. Residents of Woodpoint, remain calm. Evacuation will begin in 24 hours. The message flickered faintly, as though the words couldn't quite hold themselves together. I stared, my fingers tightening around the phone. My pulse quickened with a faint, inexplicable unease. Hey! I nudged my phone toward my best friend, tilting the screen so she could see. She leaned closer, her brow furrowing. Weird. Maybe call your mom and see what's up. Yeah, I mumbled, still staring at the screen as she turned back to her notes. No one else's phone had gone off. The hallway smelled faintly of old textbooks and disinfectant, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing with a low, constant hum. I paced toward the window, pressing my phone to my ear as it rang. Through the closed classroom doors, faint murmurs of other lectures blended into the distant hum of conversation. The line clicked. Nina? My mom answered quickly, her voice tense. Hey, I got this alert. Something about an evacuation. Yeah, everyone got it. People are scared, Nina. No one knows why they're telling us to leave. There's no reason. Most of us are staying. I mean, how do you pack up your whole life overnight? Her words tumbled out in a rush, her nervous energy palpable even through the phone. I shifted my weight, gaze drifting toward the window. Beyond the glass, the city skyline rose against the gray sky. Something about it seemed wrong. The buildings stood sharp and unmoving, almost like they'd been cut from paper and pasted against the clouds. Your brother's packing up his stuff too. I froze. Who? Silence. Your brother, she repeated, slower this time. The phone pressed harder against my ear as a strange tightness settled beneath my ribs. I should know his name, should see his face, hear his laugh, but the memory hovered just beyond reach, like trying to recall a dream after waking up. I shifted my grip on the phone, my fingers sliding slightly against the case. It's just stress, just stress. Sliding back into my seat, I ignored my friend's curious glance. The professor's voice droned on, but the words slipped past me like water over glass. I stared at my notes, half-finished sentences, fragmented thoughts, without really seeing them. By the time the lecture ended, the decision had settled in my chest, heavy and certain. I'm driving home tonight. By the time I stepped outside, the sky had sunk into a deep charcoal gray. Distant echoes of traffic hummed through the air, muffled beneath the faint scent of rain clinging to the pavement. Streetlights glowed faintly above, their halos soft against the thin mist that hovered low to the ground. I tossed my duffel bag into the trunk, the soft thud swallowed by the distant hum of passing cars. The trunk creaked as I shut it, the metal cool beneath my fingertips. Sliding into the driver's seat, I gripped the steering wheel, fingers flexing against the smooth leather as I took a breath. The engine rumbled to life beneath my hands, headlights cutting through the night as I eased onto the road. Streetlights slipped past in a steady rhythm, their pale halos thinning as I left the city behind. Neon signs, pink, blue, green, blurred into faint streaks of color before vanishing into the dark. Soon, only the distant hum of my tires on asphalt remained. The highway stretched ahead in long, empty lines. Mist clung low to the ground, curling faintly around the edges of the road like breath against glass. The air smelled faintly metallic, heavy with the promise of rain. I cracked the window slightly, the cool air brushing against my cheek as I pressed a little harder on the gas pedal. The city faded in the rearview mirror. The fork in the road appeared just ahead, two branching paths vanishing into shadow. I slowed, headlights sweeping across the worn road signs that stood crooked against the fog. The left path should lead toward the interstate, toward Woodpoint. Shouldn't it? My pulse quickened as I eased the car to a stop, eyes flicking between the darkened roads. Something felt wrong. I snatched my phone from the passenger seat and tapped open the navigation app, my fingers moving quickly against the screen. The letters vanished. I frowned, tapping the backspace key and trying again. Gone. The search bar remained empty, as though the name itself had been erased. I tried once more, slower this time, typing each letter with deliberate care. No search results. I stared at the screen, a faint prickle of unease creeping along the back of my neck. The phone buzzed violently in my hand, sharp against my fingers. I nearly dropped it as the screen flickered. White text flashing against the dark. Emergency alert. Remaining residents of Woodpoint, please prepare for relocation. Essential belongings only. The letters seemed to pulse faintly, as though the screen itself struggled to hold the message in place. A chill tightened beneath my ribs as I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, fingers gripping the steering wheel until the leather creaked beneath my touch. The road ahead vanished into shadow as fog curled low along the ground, swallowing the edges of the trees that loomed beyond the headlights. I pressed harder on the gas. The faint hum of the engine filled the silence as I tapped the call button, thumb trembling slightly as the phone rang against my ear. 3 rings. 4. You okay? My best friend's voice cracked softly through the speaker, casual but distant. I think something's wrong, I murmured, eyes locked on the fog-shrouded road. I'm driving home, but my GPS isn't working. It won't let me type in Woodpoint. A soft laugh echoed through the line, light and breathy. Are you sure this town of yours even exists? You always said none of us believed you. I forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. The fog thickened against the windshield, pressing against the glass as though trying to seep inside. Yeah, maybe, I whispered. Her voice faded into static as I tapped the call button, ending the conversation with a soft click. The phone screen dimmed as the dashboard clock flicked to 12:07 a.m. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept driving. Hours passed, but the road ahead never seemed to change. The highway stretched endlessly into the distance, flanked by trees that loomed taller and denser with every mile. Their skeletal branches twisted against the fog-thickened sky, faint silhouettes shifting through the haze. Fog clung to the ditches on either side of the road, swirling faintly like breath against glass. It curled at the edges of the asphalt, as though waiting for the chance to creep across the pavement. The air inside the car felt heavier now, subtly pressing against my chest, as though the atmosphere itself had thickened. I adjusted the vents, but the faint stream of air did little to ease the sensation. The phone buzzed against the passenger seat, breaking the low hum of the engine. I glanced down. 30% battery remaining. Swiping the notification away, my gaze flicked toward the dashboard clock. 12:07 a.m. My stomach clenched. I tapped the glass, but the numbers didn't change. The clock remained frozen, as though time itself had stalled somewhere along the highway. The air pressed heavier against my skin, a faint pulse of pressure that seemed to deepen with each breath. The radio crackled. I jolted, fingers tightening against the wheel as static hissed through the speakers. The sound shifted, distant and thin. Then, your brother said the same thing. I told him to pack light, but... I inhaled sharply, eyes fixed on the road as my pulse hammered beneath my ribs. Who? The word slipped from my lips before I could stop it, low and uncertain against the hum of the tires. Silence. Only the steady drone of the engine and the faint rush of air against the windshield answered. I swallowed hard, trying to recall his name, his face, but the memory slid further from reach with every second, like a word forgotten mid-sentence. Faint light flickered through the fog ahead. A weathered gas station sign swayed faintly in the breeze, its faded letters barely legible against the rusted frame. I pulled in beside the only pump, tires crunching softly against gravel as the engine rumbled into silence. Beyond the glass window, shelves of faded snacks and dusty magazines sat beneath dim fluorescent lights. Their faint buzzing hummed faintly against the night. I stepped inside. The faint chime of the doorbell echoed through the still air, blending with the low hum of the refrigerators against the back wall. The air smelled faintly of old paper and something metallic, like coins left too long in a drawer. The cashier stood behind the counter, a man in his 40s with rough hands and kind eyes, sleeves rolled to his elbows as he sorted through a stack of receipts. He looked up as I approached, his gaze lighting with recognition. "Nina? Haven't seen you in years." I froze, fingers hovering over my wallet as confusion tightened in my chest. "Who is he?" I forced a faint smile, nodding slightly as I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum from the nearest shelf. My hands trembled slightly as I set them on the counter, pulse fluttering unevenly beneath my ribs. The faint beep of the scanner broke the silence as he rang up the items, eyes flicking toward mine, as if searching for something beneath the surface. "Hope you're headed home before it's too late," he added softly. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just handed me the paper bag, fingers brushing faintly against mine as if lingering for a moment too long. I stepped outside without another word. The engine rumbled back to life as I pulled away from the gas station, gravel crunching beneath the tires before giving way to smooth asphalt. As the headlights swept past the building, their beams caught on the clock mounted above the entrance, 12:07 a.m. The numbers glowed faintly against the fogged glass. I pressed harder on the gas. The headlights carved a narrow path through the fog, but beyond their reach, the world dissolved into shifting shadows. The trees along the roadside had become little more than ghostly silhouettes, their skeletal branches pressing closer, as if the forest itself leaned inward. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, pulse thudding beneath my ribs. The engine hummed steadily beneath my hands, a faint vibration that barely cut through the suffocating silence inside the car. The fog thickened, swirling in faint ribbons that clung to the asphalt and brushed faintly against the windows like breath against glass. The road curved ahead, splitting into two narrow paths. I slowed the car, eyes flicking between the darkened signs that loomed faintly against the fog. Left or right? I should know this. But the landmarks I expected, billboards, rusted mile markers, the faint glow of distant farmhouses, were gone. Faint flashes of memory flickered through my mind. A weathered bridge, the neon sign of a diner, a billboard half obscured by trees. But the images vanished as quickly as they appeared, slipping away like fragments of a dream. I grabbed my phone from the passenger seat, thumb tapping quickly against the screen as I reopened the GPS. The search bar blinked, waiting. The letters vanished. I frowned, fingers moving faster. Gone. I tried again, slower this time, deliberate. No search results. The air in the car felt heavier now, pressing against my chest as if the space itself had grown smaller. The phone vibrated violently against my hand, startling me enough that I nearly dropped it. I swiped the screen open. White text flashed against the dark, pulsing faintly as though the screen struggled to hold the message in place. Final alert. Evacuation is now mandatory. Failure to comply will result in permanent relocation. The letters glitched slightly at the edges, breaking apart into faint static lines before reassembling themselves. I dropped the phone back into the cup holder and pressed my foot harder against the gas pedal. The road narrowed beneath the glare of the headlights, the trees pressing closer as the fog swirled thick and heavy around the car. I hit the call button without thinking, fingers trembling slightly as the phone rang against my ear. 3 rings. 4. The faint crackle of static hissed through the speaker. "Mom?" My voice broke the silence, thin and strained. For a moment, only static answered. Then, "Nina, you have to hurry. It's all slipping away. We're still here." But the words cut off with a harsh snap of static. "Mom? What do you mean, Mom?" Silence. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, fingers pressing hard against the steering wheel as I stared at the road ahead. The fog pressed harder against the windshield, swirling in faint tendrils that brushed against the glass as if searching for a way inside. Branches scraped faintly against the sides of the car as the road narrowed further, trees bending close as if trying to pull me off course. I pressed harder on the gas, knuckles pale against the wheel as the engine growled beneath me. Somewhere beyond the fog, a faint light flickered, but the road ahead remained endless. Fog clung to the windshield in thick, shifting waves, swallowing the world beyond the glass. The headlights sliced through the haze, but the light seemed to bend and pulse against the mist as if the air itself resisted their reach. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, and the engine growled beneath me as the speedometer climbed. The cold inside the car deepened. My breath fogged faintly against the window, thin wisps of condensation blooming and fading with each shallow exhale. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, fingers aching against the smooth leather. The memories were unraveling faster now. The harder I tried to hold on to them, the faster they slipped away. Birthdays, school days, summers by the lake, gone. I tried to picture the house I grew up in, the way the front porch creaked beneath my feet, the sound of the screen door slamming in the wind, but the images blurred and faded before I could grasp them. Even the name of the town, the place I was supposed to be heading, had vanished from my mind. All that remained was the faint, hollow knowledge that somewhere ahead, beyond the fog, there was a place that should feel like home. But the word itself felt foreign now, thin and weightless against my tongue. My fingers fumbled for the phone, breath hitching as I pressed the call button without thinking. 3 rings. 4. You okay? The familiar voice cracked softly through the speaker, casual but distant, as if from another life. I can't remember where I'm going, I whispered, knuckles tightening against the steering wheel. You said you were driving home, remember? But where is home? The words felt wrong even as I spoke them, as though I were reciting lines from a script I no longer understood. Silence stretched thin across the line, broken only by the faint crackle of static. Then, I don't think you ever told me the name. The call ended. The screen blinked once, then dimmed. Road signs flashed past on either side of the highway, their metal frames stripped bare of words and numbers. The shapes of trees loomed taller and denser beyond the shoulder, branches scraping faintly against the air as the road narrowed beneath their shadows. The fog pressed harder against the glass, thick and shifting like something alive. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, the engine straining beneath my hands as the speedometer edged higher. Faster. White shapes flickered between the trees, thin figures standing just beyond the reach of the headlights. Their faces were blurred and indistinct, as if the fog had stripped away their features. I kept my eyes locked on the road, refusing to glance toward the trees as branches scraped faintly against the car's frame. Faster. The headlights carved through the fog in sharp, narrow lines, but the road ahead had no end. The road stretched endlessly, shrouded in fog that clung to the asphalt like a second skin. My fingers ached from gripping the steering wheel, my pulse a faint echo in my ears. But then, the fog began to thin. Slowly, as though the air itself exhaled, the heavy veil lifted, revealing faint outlines of telephone poles rising from the mist like sentinels. Their wires stretched between them in long, delicate lines that vanished into the distance. Beyond the haze, the faint shapes of houses emerged. Simple structures with sloping roofs and shuttered windows, their silhouettes softened by the lingering mist. The road ahead straightened, stretching out like a ribbon of pale asphalt beneath the dim sky. To my right, a weathered sign loomed at the roadside. Its wooden frame was cracked with age, the paint faded and peeling from years of rain and sun. Welcome to Woodpoint. My gaze skimmed over the letters without recognition. The name meant nothing. I slowed the car slightly as I passed a row of houses, their porches empty beneath the weight of the fog. Some windows glowed faintly with distant light, but no movement stirred beyond the glass. Ahead, a small white house stood close to the road, its paint slightly weathered but well kept. The narrow garden along the front yard was neat and orderly, rows of pale flowers swaying faintly against the breeze. A woman stood among the flowers, her hands dusted with soil as she paused to wipe them against the apron tied around her waist. Her hair, streaked with gray, framed a face that seemed vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place why. She looked up as I passed, eyes locking with mine through the glass. For a moment, her gaze softened, a faint smile pulling at the corners of her mouth as she raised a hand in a slow, deliberate wave. I stared, unsure why the gesture stirred something faint beneath my ribs, but the feeling faded as quickly as it had come, leaving only a vague curiosity that dissolved into nothing as I looked away. The car rolled past the house, tires humming faintly against the pavement. The phone vibrated against the passenger seat, the sound sharp against the hush of the engine. I glanced down. White text pulsed against the dark screen, flickering faintly at the edges as though the letters struggled to hold themselves together. Emergency alert. Evacuation complete. Woodpoint has been successfully decommissioned. I blinked, the name unfamiliar despite its clarity. Woodpoint? The word felt foreign, hollow, just a string of syllables without meaning. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat without another thought. The screen dimmed as the vibration faded into silence. The road stretched onward, fading into the distance beneath a sky the color of faded steel. Mist gathered low along the ground, curling faintly around the edges of the asphalt as if reluctant to release its hold. As I drove, the faint outlines of houses and telephone poles slowly dissolved into the fog, one by one, until only the road remained. Somewhere behind me, the town, and everyone within it, vanished as if they had never been.